Okay, today we're going to talk about quadrantal angles, or really just different types of angles. We're going to start out with quadrantal angles. And these are angles with their terminal side on the x or y axis. So, like we talked about yesterday, you're still going to have that initial side on the x-axis here. But these quadrantal angles are going to have a terminal side on an axis. So if we start going counterclockwise, we're going to go to our first axis, that positive y-axis. That gives us 90 degrees. Okay. Our next one, we're still going to start out with an initial side on the x-axis, and we're going to go to our next axis. Okay, so 180 degrees. That would be a quadrantal angle. The next one, we're going to go past that 180 degree mark and end up on that negative y-axis this time. Okay, that'd be 270 degrees. Each time we're adding 90 degrees. Okay, and then our last one is going to start out on the x-axis and go all the way around till it hits it again. That will be 360 degrees. Okay, so there are 4 quadrantal angles. The bottom part of your notes, we're going to split up what we call a unit circle. We're going to split it up into different angle degree measurements. So we'll split up these axes and talk about 30 degrees, 45 degrees, stuff like that, and talk about the radians. This is something you're going to have to do on your test on Friday. I wouldn't memorize it. I would actually know how to split up that circle, and it's going to make it a lot easier to do on your test than just memorizing a bunch of numbers, right? So let's look at our first circle. The first circle is broken up into 4 different sections, right? So what I like to do is I'll start off with, this would be 0, and over here would be 180 degrees, right? And we know that 180 degrees is the same thing as pi, right, in radians. We talked about that yesterday. So what I do is I count up, okay, how many sections is it split into between 0 and a whole pi? Okay, and it's split into 2 sections. So I'm trying to cut this pi into 2 sections. I'm going to cut it in half. So I'm going to divide by 2. Okay, and this is the same thing as 90 degrees. So what we're going to do on the opposite side, we're still going to cut it in half, but we're going to add, like we already have a whole one. If we're starting out with our initial side on the x-axis, we've already hit 1 whole pi plus another half. Okay, so this would be 3 pi over 2. Okay, which is 270 degrees. All right, so another way I think about it is like I said, I'm splitting it up into 2 sections. So that's 1 over 2 pi, 2 over 2 pi is going to give me 1 pi, right? And then add another one, 3 over 2 pi, and 4 over 2 pi is going to give me 2 pi, 360 degrees. So I kind of split it up like that, and then I just reduce the fractions, if that makes sense. So 1 over 2, 2 over 2, 3 over 2, 4 over 2. Okay, so that's the first circle. Second circle, I'm not splitting it up into 2 sections this time. I'm splitting it up into, let me see, we're cutting it in half like this. Alright, so if I think about from 0 to pi, because that's a whole one, right? I'm splitting it up into 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Okay, you just count from 0 to 1. How many sections does it cut into? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the first line that I get to is going to be 1 over 4. It's my very first line. And you don't have to put that 1. Okay, it's an understood 1. The next one, let's see, this is 1 over 4, 2 over 4, which will reduce to pi over 2. The next one is going to be 3 over 4. And then 4 over 4 will reduce to 1. Okay? And keep going with those numbers. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. My fifth line is going to be 5 pi over 4. 6 pi over 4, which will reduce to 3 pi over 2. 7 pi over 4. And 8 pi over 4 is the same thing as 2 pi. So if you can get to where you're not memorizing, this is 7 pi over 4, that's 3 pi over 4, you're actually cutting it into sections. It makes it so much easier. Okay, so just figure out how many sections you're cutting it into, going from 0 to 1, and then do 1, 2, 3, 4. Just count out the lines. Okay. If we're talking about degrees, we know this is 0 degrees and this is 90 degrees, right? Halfway in between that would be 45 degrees. Okay, on your test, you're going to have to know both degrees and radians. Okay, we know this is 180 degrees. So if we cut it in half from 90 to 180, halfway in between that is going to be, let's see, add 45 degrees, it'd be 135. Okay, if I add 45 more degrees, it's 225. Then you have 270 degrees, and if I add 45 here, that would be 315. Add 45 more, and I have 360 degrees. Okay. Alright, so that's if you cut it into fourths. The last one we're going to learn, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. I'm going to draw a whole new circle. So go ahead and count up the sections. If we go from 0 to pi, how many sections are in between that? From 0 to a whole pi. Let's see. Let me go ahead and draw this out. So if you count it up from 0 to pi, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections. Okay, so we're cutting it into sixths. So our first line is going to be 1/6. Our second line is going to be 2/6. If we reduce that fraction, you get pi over 3. Our next one is going to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3/6. Okay, that'll reduce to pi over 2. Okay, so 3/6. Next one is 4/6. That'll reduce to 2 pi over 3. Okay, the next one would be 5/6. 6 over 6 will reduce to 1. Okay, so we have pi. And then keep it going. We have 5 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6 will reduce to 4/3. Okay, and then we have 9 pi over 6 will reduce to, what is that, 2/3? No, sorry, 3/2. 3 pi over 2. So we have 9 pi over 6. The next one will be 10 pi over 6. That'll reduce to 5/2. Okay. No, it's 5/3. I'm so sorry. I'm losing it. Yeah, it's 5 pi over 3. I'm sorry. And the next one would be 11 pi over 6. That won't reduce. And then the last one is 12 pi over 6. It'll reduce to 2 pi. Okay, so it's not as bad as it looks if you think about it in sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay. Now degree measurements, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to start off with 0 degrees. This next mark is going to be 30 degrees. Okay, I'm splitting it up into 30-degree measurements. So if I add 30 more, it's going to be 60 degrees. Add 30 is 90 degrees. Add 30, 120, 150, 180. Add 30, I get 210, 240. Add 30, that's 270, 300, 330, and 360. Okay. So you'll actually be doing this on your worksheet today, having to label all these sections on one unit circle. So that'll be a good time to practice what you're going to do for your test on Friday. Practice splitting it up into sections, okay? And it, like I said, it's going to make it a lot easier.